Say to Nephariah, the king of Egypt, my brother, my son-in-law, whom I love, and whom loves me. It is Terashta that speaks, a great king, the king of the Mitanni, your father-in-law, who loves you, your brother. For me all goes well, for you may all go well. For Tyre, your mother, for your household, may all go well. For Teruhapa, my daughter, your wife, for the rest of your wives, for your sons, for your magnates, for your chariots, for your horses, for your troops, for your country, and for whatever else belongs to you, may all go very, very well. This is an extract from one of the Amarna letters dating back 3,400 years. The clay tablets were sent to the king of the Mitanni, by the king of the Mitanni to the king of Egypt. The name Tushrashta comes from the Vedic branch of the Indo European language and means he whose chariot is vehement. Why was there an Indo European king with an Indo Aryan name in Syria? New DNA studies being released on a daily basis are filling in large gaps of knowledge about one of the most important expansions of people in human history. Some 5,000 years ago, the Indo-European tribes of southern Russia and the Ukraine became one of the earliest people to domesticate the horse and develop the world's first wheeled warrior chariots. They first moved west into what is now Poland and Germany, where the corded ware culture was established. Here it is thought that a genetic mutation that allows adults to digest milk became rapidly common amongst their population and contributed to a significant population increase. They moved further west into Europe, reaching Britain in 2500 BC. A genetic study in 2017 shows that they replaced 85% of the native population. Further south in Spain, a genetic study shows that these Indo-European invaders wiped out the native male population off the genetic map. Reaching Greece in around 1500 BC, archaeological records, genetic studies and literary evidence shows the invading Indo-Europeans established themselves as a ruling military aristocracy whilst likely enslaving a large part of the native population. Around the same time, ancient DNA studies confirmed their arrival in Iran. Another 2018 study shows the massive genetic impact resulting from Indo-European conquest of the Indian subcontinent. The genetic signature of this invading population was nearly identical to that of the corded ware culture in northern Europe. The Indo-European arrival into Iran is shown very clearly in recent genetic studies. Iranian is an Indo-European language, and there is a large amount of archaeological evidence documenting the arrival of the Indo-European tribes. Evidence of Indo-European invasions further west in the Middle East, in places such as Iraq, Syria and Palestine, are less clear. However, an Indo-European invasion certainly took place, and there are details recorded in some of the world's first historical texts. The invasion of the Middle East was unlike any other Indo-European invasion. During the second millennium, the western area of the Middle East was the centre of the world's first civilizations. It was one of the most populated regions in the world, with large militarized city-states and empires. From 2000 BC, the Indo-European tribes were in the process of conquering Turkey, Iran and northern India. The pressures from these conquests perhaps drove some of the native peoples of the Caucasus Mountains to migrate or infiltrate into Mesopotamia and northern Syria. Two of these ethno-linguistic groups that will be discussed are the Hawaiians and Kassites. The Kassites came from the Zagros Mountains in the regions of Luristan, Iran, and the Hawaiians spread from regions further north, particularly Armenia. For some reason, these non-Indo-European speaking tribes came under the leadership of an Indo-European military aristocracy and an elite chariot warriors referred to as the Mariano, an Indo-Aryan word meaning chariot warrior. For the first half of the millennia, these Caucasus tribes under Indo-European leadership came to dominate the older people of the Middle Eastern plains, most of whom were Semites. These groups were the first in the Middle East to use the horse in war and the first to use the light chariot with bespoke wheels. Indo-European names of gods appear among the Kassites and of the gods amongst the Hawaiians. In both cases, the names reveal the Indic branch of the Indo-European family. So these people likely came from the Indo-European group that moved through Iran to conquer northern India. The Kassite people of the Zagros Mountains, fighting under the leadership of Indo-European aristocracy and the Indo-European Mariano warriors, came to control Babylonia in 1531 BC. They ruled there for the next 400 years. Their 400-year reign laid an essential groundwork for the development of subsequent Babylonian culture. The Kassite dynasty refurbished many of the ancient Babylonian cities and constructed a new city called Derg-ku-Lezu, named after one of the Kassite kings, near modern-day Baghdad. During their rule, there was a military caste formed that was keenly interested in horses and somewhat separated from the ordinary population. These are Kassite belt or quiver plaques. In the centre, Mithra and his lions are again amongst the figures. The right-hand plate has been interpreted as a hierarchy of Indic deities. In the topmost of these three contains human figures are Varuna with his sacred ox and Mithra, the twin rulers of the universe. Below these, Indra, the storm god, with Matras, his attendants in the form of lions. The Hawaiians, a separate ethno-linguistic group to the Kassites, came under the leadership of another Indo-European group that spoke the same Proto-Vedic Indo-Aryan language. They established city-states in northern Mesopotamia and Syria, under the chief of them, the kingdom of Mitanni, which endured until the 14th century. The Mitanni kings, ruling from their capital Wasugani on the Khyber in modern-day Syria, fought for a time on equal terms with the Egyptians, who were pressing north through Syria under the 18th dynasty, and for a time they held Assyria in subjugation. On the northern frontier, they were at first equally successful against the third-party Indo-European power, the Hittites. The Indo-European origins of the Mitanni aristocracy are linguistically more closely linked with the Indo-Aryans of the Indian subcontinent, rather than the Indo-European Hittites of Anatolia. They are therefore linked with the Indo-European group that invaded India, and as genetic evidence shows, this Indo-European group was part of a reflux back out of the corded ware culture in northern Europe. This group followed the path along the Pontic steppe, establishing the Sinthashna culture before descending south. It is known that these invading Indo-European tribes were made up of both men and women. Genetically unmixed remains of individuals that carry the genetic signature of the corded ware people have been found in India and Iran that postdates the invasions by over 400 years. It could be thought that these Indo-Europeans of the Western Middle East broke away from the main body before they arrived in India, or that they decided to go west after arriving in India. The peacock element in Mitanni art possibly suggests the latter is true. The peacock was native to India and was not found elsewhere in the Middle East at the time. The peacock heavily influenced Vedic and later Iranian art. Peacock symbolism features heavily in Mitanni art. This was the royal seal of Sosteta Mitanni dynasty. Although still doubted by some, likely for political reasons, the linguistic evidence for the existence of the Indo-European leadership of the Hawaiians and Kassites is very strong. The names of Mitanni kings and the capital were of the Indo-Aryan branch of the Indo-European language. For instance, Tirata was a form of the Indo-Aryan, meaning Tirasa, meaning possessor of a chariot. The name Sutuara was a form of Stafa, meaning warrior. And the name of the Mitanni capital, Waskaniu, was a form of Vaskan, meaning wealth mine. The words are more closely linked with the Indo-Aryan languages of the Indian subcontinent rather than the later Indo-Iranian languages. There's a treaty between a Hittite king and a Mitanni king, where the Vedic gods Indra, Mithras, Nastari, and Uvanas are mentioned, and there's also a treaty on horse training and upkeep by a Mitanni called Kikuli, wherein technical terms related to horsemanship are in Indo-Aryan. Indo-Aryan traces also appear in the Kassite documents from the Babylonian dynasty, such as Suryas and the war god Marathas. In addition, over 100 such names of local personalities have been produced by scholars. The Indo-Aryan character of these is accepted by most scholars. Moreover, they refer to kings and ruling elites spread out over an area that included Syria and Palestine. This suggests elite dominance of the Mitanni state over large neighbouring territories by an intruding martial Indo-European class. Although successful, these Indo-European groups became subsumed by the natives they encountered and left little linguistic or cultural legacy. In 1600 BC, 100 years after the invasion of Babylonia by the Kassites and the establishment of Indo-European kings in Mitanni, an ethnically diverse group from disputed origins, referred to as the Hyksos, invaded and conquered Egypt. It was fought by Wolfgang Help, one of the most well-regarded Egyptologists, and many others, to have been part of the wider Indo-European expansion. However, the consensus amongst scholars today is that there wasn't any Indo-European element among the leadership of this group, and it's even doubted that horses and chariots were used in the invasion. From the records of pharaohs' names and personalities documented in Egyptian text, there doesn't seem to be any clear evidence of Indo-Europeans amongst this invading group. However, the diplomatic dealings of the pharaohs of Egypt are recorded in the Amarna letters, suggest that the pharaohs of Egypt had a significant amount of Indo-European ancestry. Amarna I was the king of the Hawaiian Mitanni in the 15th century BC. The name Amarna comes from Indo-Aryan and means his abode has cosmic and moral order, a reference to scripture of the Rig Veda. His reign coincided with the reigns of Egyptian pharaohs Amenhotep II and Thutmose IV. Amenhotep is referred to in the Amarna letters as an ancestor who established an alliance with Thutmose IV of Egypt. At one point during Thutmose proposed a marriage between Thutmose and Amarna's daughter Mutriana. The Egyptians had to make seven consecutive marriage proposals before Amarna finally agreed. Thus, Amarna was the father of Queen Mutriana and the maternal grandfather of the pharaoh Amenhotep III. Amenhotep III married a woman known as Tyre, whose father was Eula. The biographical dictionary of ancient Egypt suggests that Eula was of royal Mitanni origin, quoting, "It is conceivable that he had some Mitanni ancestry, since it is known that knowledge of horses and chariotry was introduced into Egypt from the northern lands, and Eula was the king's master of horses." It is also discussed the possibility that Eula was the brother of Queen Mutriana, who was the mother of Pharaoh Amenhotep III. Amenhotep III and Tyre had a son, Akhenaten, who became the next Egyptian pharaoh. Akhenaten married Nefertiti, also known as the Lady of Two Lambs, and she is widely thought to be the Mitanni princess Tadu Kippa, who was gifted to Akhenaten's father by the Mitanni king Turashta. Akhenaten and Nefertiti had several children, one of which was Tutankhamun. Therefore, Tutankhamun possibly had up to 75% ancestry from the Indo-European Mitanni aristocracy. In the year 2009, extended DNA tests have been carried out with the mummy of Tutankhamun and other members of his family. These have only been partly published in February 2010. Despite several demands, the results of the Y DNA tests have been shut away. IGEA, a genetic a German genetic genealogy company was able to reconstruct the Y-DNA profile of Tutankhamun, his father Akhelson, and his grandfather Amenhotep III, with the help of a recording from the Discovery Channel. The result was that Tutankhamun belonged to the haploid group R1b1a2, which more than 50% of all men in Western Europe belong to. In Egypt, the contingent of this haploid group is below 1%, and this 1% is likely caused by later European migration during the Roman and Greek dynastic periods. Although the idea's publication was received with skepticism, there has been no denial of the results by the original research team.
First off, how do you study King Tut's DNA?
Well, we didn't do this research on our own. We just reviewed what we found at the Discovery Channel. So this research was done by a team of scientists in 2009, but they didn't publish these results. We just found these results, and we had knowledge of interpretation, and we decided to publish it on our own because they refused to do so up to now.
So the descendants of King Tut, in this case, 70% of British men, 70% of Spanish men, and 60% of French men all belong to this genetic group?
Yes, exactly. Yes, they share a common ancestor with these pharaohs.
Well, talk about those common ancestors. Where were they from? Who were they exactly?
We think they lived around the Black Sea or maybe in the Caucasus, but we don't know exactly where they lived. But this group was founded by one man who lived about 9,500 years ago in this area around the Black Sea, but we can't tell exactly at this point of time.
Since this haploid group is inherited paternally, the source could not be the Matini princesses sent as wives to the Egyptian pharaohs, or even Euler, the king's master of horses and the father of Queen Tyre. The detection of this haploid group suggests a yet-to-be explained Indo European ancestry amongst the early Egyptian pharaohs. In 1400 BC, the Matini realm was destroyed by opposite sides by the Hittites and the resurgent Assyrians. Thereafter, until the early years of the 12th century, the Near East was dominated by four great powers, who achieved a certain equilibrium: the Egyptians and the Hittite empires in the west, and the Assyrian and Kassite Babylonian kingdoms in the east. This international order was finally broken by a new wave of migration from the north. Set in motion by further Indo European peoples, but involving others, these groups, known as the Assyrian people, overthrew the Hittites in their homeland and ended the Egyptian empire in Asia. But it left the Assyrian and Babylonian empires intact. In central Anatolia, the Indo European Phrygians from Thrace became the dominant people. But on the southern edge and in northern Syria, small states persisted which still used the Indo European Hittite languages for some purposes, as their king's names show, and some counted remnants of the Hawaiians amongst their subjects. They and the Phrygians were eventually destroyed by the expanding power of Assyria. The growth of the Assyrian power was in one aspect a strong reaction against the earlier dominance of the so-termed highland peoples. Assyrian records tell of highland campaigns with pride and a sense of justified revenge.